Welcome to Stories with a Twang. I'm Nathan. For today's episode, I have two stories for you. The first one is called My Sister Who Was Missing for Half a Year Came Home Today, But I Know It Isn't Her by r/No Sleep Fanatic. My sister went missing 6 months ago. The whole town was devastated. She was very popular among the people who lived here, unlike me. The only reason people spoke to me was to attempt to comfort me about my sister's disappearance. Jada had always been the golden child. She was 3 years younger than me. She was a storybook beautiful girl with emerald green eyes and long locks of jet black hair. She got straight A's and always fulfilled my parents' expectations. I was a scrawny child with greasy brown hair and terrible acne. My parents always told me things like, "You should be more like your sister," and "We're glad Jada didn't turn out like you." Jada gave the valedictorian speech at her high school, graduated from NYU with a doctoral degree, and became a surgeon. Unlike me, she was very successful. My job doesn't pay me nearly enough, and I still live with my parents. I am 33 years old now. Jada would come visit us every weekend. She would tell us about how wonderful her life was and how much she loved her job. I honestly couldn't stand it. She knew what she was doing, and she was practically rubbing it in my face. She would look at my annoyed expression, and you could almost see a smirk forming on her face. It made my blood boil. One particular Friday night about 6 months ago, Jada came over. She looked pale and had dark eye bags. "Jay, darling, is everything all right?" my mother asked worriedly. Jada was zoned out, and a few seconds later she snapped back to reality and said, "Oh, I'm alright. I had an all-night shift last night, so I'm a bit tired." I knew that was bullshit. She always looked around when she was lying, and her eyes were darting across the room. There was always something different about Jada, like she knew when something bad was going to happen. This was one of those times. "Why don't you go lie down?" said my mother. Jada obeyed and stumbled off into the guest bedroom. The next day, she was gone. There was no sign of where she might have went. She left no notes saying where she was leaving. She just disappeared. Everyone assumed she had just went on a walk or something, until 3 hours later when she still hadn't come back. That evening we filed a missing persons report. A search party was organized, but she wasn't found until 6 months later. 6 months later, there were 3 soft knocks on the front door, almost too quiet to be heard. I thought I was just hearing things, so I ignored it. No one ever knocked on our door. They normally just used the doorbell. But there it was again, 3 knocks, louder this time. I got up to open it, and when I did, my body froze. It was Jada. She beamed at me and hugged me tightly. My parents rushed in and happy tears streamed down their faces. "Oh honey, we never thought we'd see you again," cried my father. The neighbors came outside to see what the commotion was about, and soon enough the whole neighborhood was at our house welcoming Jada home. Everyone was exhilarated to have her back, except for me, because I knew damn well this wasn't my sister. Of course, I would never tell anyone this. They would assume I'm crazy. But I am 100% positive that this woman is not Jada. You want to know why? Because I single-handedly buried her in the backyard. Our next story is entitled The Return of the Ruined Banker from 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey by Catherine Tucker Wyndham. One afternoon not too long ago, a guide was showing a group of tourists through Selma Sternovit Hall. The visitors had been given a brief history of the mansion from the time of its construction in 1852, and after admiring graceful proportions of the downstairs parlors, they were guided to an upstairs bedroom. It was here in the quiet of this corner room that the guide, while describing the rope-lace trundle bed and other old furnishings, suddenly stopped in mid-sentence. The guest noticed that she had become very pale, and one of the men in the group started to help her to a chair, but before he reached her, she took a deep breath and continued her interrupted story. After the tour was over and the visitors had gone, the guide hurried to her friend who was keeping the guest register. "He's here again," she exclaimed. "He brushed against me in the upstairs bedroom. I never felt anything like it. His touch was clammy and frightening. And just last week," she exclaimed, "he was in the downstairs parlor. I'll never forget how that sudden rush of cold air felt. It seems he always comes when there are groups of tourists here. I can't decide whether he dislikes having strangers in his home or whether he wants to remind me to tell the people his remarkable success story and what a fine person he was. Whatever the reason, I know John Parkman's ghost is right here in Sturtevant Hall." John McGee Parkman lived in the white-columned mansion now known as Sturtevant Hall for only 3 years, 1864 to 1866, but they were 3 of the happiest years of his life. At the age of 29, Parkman was president of the First National Bank of Selma, a new institution with a capital of $100,000. He had a charming wife and 2 beautiful little daughters, Emily Norris Parkman and Maria Hunter Parkman. He occupied a place of esteem in the social and business life of Selma, and his home was one of the most splendid in the entire Black Belt. Life was good. Then, with a suddenness that shocked the entire community, John Parkman's career ended in disgrace. The youthful bank president was the victim of the same error of judgment that ruined older and more experienced businessmen during the post-war period. He speculated in cotton. Soon after he had invested large sums of the bank's money in cotton, the price of the fiber dropped from 30 and 35 cents to 15 and 18 cents per pound, and Parkman's bank lacked the funds to cover the losses. Because federal money was deposited in the First National Bank, General Wagger Swain, commanding officer of the United States troops in the Selma district, moved in quickly, closed the bank, and placed Parkman under arrest. Parkman was taken under guard to Cahaba and confined in Castle Morgan, the prison which had only a short time before been used by the Confederate government for the incarceration of Yankee prisoners. Up to this point, the facts about Parkman's life are clear, but there are confusing and conflicting reports regarding what happened after his imprisonment, particularly what happened following his escape from the stockade at Cahaba. According to one story, friends in Selma, men who believed that Parkman's poor judgment did not merit such severe punishment, arranged for his escape from Castle Morgan. They first bribed the warden of the prison to cooperate with them in carrying out the escape plan. Then they arranged for a steamer to be waiting at the Cahaba Wharf, some 50 yards down the bluff from the prison, to pick Parkman up. The scheme called for a group of musicians dressed in costumes to march up and down in front of the stockade to divert the guards while Parkman climbed over the rear wall of the enclosure and then escaped by running down the bluff to the waiting boat. Every detail of the planned prison break seemed perfect. The costumed musicians were putting on a splendid show at the prison entrance. The warden had left Parkman's cell unlocked and the boat was waiting. But someone saw Parkman as he was climbing over the wall and gave the alarm. Several shots were fired. Some witnesses said Parkman was shot as he dived into the river. Others said he was so frightened by the shots that he dived under the boat and was killed by the big paddle wheel. Still, others contended that he made good his escape. There was even disagreement about who fired at Parkman. One report was that his so-called friends shot him to make certain that Parkman would never divulge information which would have linked them with the bank scandal. These friends, one story relates, claimed his body in secret and, hidden by the thick shrubbery, buried it at night near Scuppernong Arbor at the rear of Sturtevant Hall. Another, more romantic but less plausible story says that the young man's body was swept by the current down the Alabama River and that it finally lodged in the low limbs of a willow tree. It was the same tree, this story states, whose limbs had broken the window in their stateroom when Parkman was bringing his bride up the river from Mobile to Selma aboard a luxury river steamer. If there are questions concerning Parkman's death, there is little question regarding the return of his ghost to his beloved Sturtevant Hall. Students of the supernatural say the ghost came back to try to clear Parkman's name of the blemish cast on it by his handling of the bank's funds, and perhaps their theory is right. He did not return to Sturtevant Hall immediately after his death. In fact, it was not until after his home had been sold to Emil Gilman, about 3 years after the Castle Morgan episode, that Parkman's ghost first visited the premises. The property, for which Parkman had paid $65,000 when he purchased it in February 1864, brought only $12,000 when it was sold to Gilman, and the transaction left Parkman's family destitute. Servants in the home, many of whom had been employed by Parkman, were the first to be aware that his spirit had returned. They refused to walk through the back lot near the carriage house after dark. And even during the daytime, they avoided the shadowy area with its thick growth of fig trees and scuppernong vines. "Mr. Parkman's there," they would answer when asked why they skirted around the back lot. "He's come back." 3 or 4 of them stoutly declared that they had seen Parkman walking around in the orchard. Others were equally firm in their assertions that they had seen him on the side portico leaning against the iron grillwork railings. And still others told of having seen him quite distinctly gazing out from the cupola atop the house. All of the servants who talked of having seen Parkman affirmed their belief that he was buried near the Scuppernong arbor and that his restless spirit roamed from that grave. Even when they were told that Parkman was properly interred in the family lot in Live Oak Cemetery, they kept insisting, "Mr. Parkman is right here. He's buried under the fig tree by the arbor, and he's troubled and restless, mighty restless." It must indeed be the restless, troubled ghost of John Parkman that wanders through the spacious rooms and around the grounds of the home he loved, appearing only when crowds of people are present. Is he objecting to the intrusion of these strangers into his home? Is he trying to play again the role of gracious host to a gay gathering of guests? Or is he seeking a defender, someone who will clear him of the stigma that has marred his good name? Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this week's stories. I would like to thank r/NoSleepFanatic for letting me read their amazing story. If you would like to learn more about Katherine Tucker Windham, you can go over to ktwindham.weebly.com. If you have a story you would like me to read on the show, you can send that over to storieswithatwang@gmail.com. You can find the show on Facebook and Instagram at Stories with a Twang Podcast. You can also find new episodes of the show on YouTube at Stories with a Twang Podcast. It would mean an awful lot if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to share with your friends and family. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and remember that a little twang goes a long way.